Members, these proceedings will be webcast and recorded by the Council, but will anyone else be recording or filming them? I ask this so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. No. Agenda item 2, I've received apologies for absence from Councillor Ells, Councillor Mrs Hinder, Councillor Derek Mortimer, Councillor Mrs Stockel, Councillor English. Are there any applications for dispensations? Agenda item 3. Thank you. Agenda item 4. Are there any disclosures of disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests by members? Councillor Bunton.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Item 17 about St Michael's School polling station review. I made my views very clear in the initial consultation on this, and having taken legal advice, I will remove myself from the meeting for this particular item. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Boughton. Are there any disclosable officers? Are there any disclosures by officers? No, thank you. Agenda item 5. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? We're doing well, thank you. Agenda item 6. Is it agreed that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed? Thank you. And agenda item 7. Are the minutes of the meeting of the Borough Council held on the 21st of September 2016 agreed as a correct record? Thank you. Agenda item 8. Mayor's announcements. So first of all, I would like to welcome Councillor John Barnett to his first full council meeting after his re-election. Sadly, he was unable to attend the council meeting on the 21st of September 2016 due to a hospital admission. Councillor Barnett, I do sincerely hope you have recovered, and welcome back to the council chamber.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
It's also lovely to see Councillor Mrs Annabel Blackmore back after her absence at the last council meeting due to an emergency hospital admission. Likewise, Councillor Blackmore, I hope you have recovered and you're ready for the cut and thrust of the council chamber. It's with sadness that I mention the fact that it has been reported that the Maidstone Barracks is to close in 2027. The Association of the Army in Maidstone goes back nearly 200 years, and I believe that Maidstone has truly embraced the Army during those years. And likewise, Maidstone has benefited from its association with the Army. I've been asked to mention by Councillor Derek Mortimer that Maidstone YMCA Tovel and Lewes Centres won the best centre in England. This was against the competing finalists of Birmingham and Swansea. So, congratulations. It's a few months since the last council meeting, and between myself, the Deputy Mayor and former mayors, we've attended 88 mayoral events. I would like to formally thank the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Malcolm Greer, for his support, despite the fact that his wife, the Mayoress, Deputy Mayoress, Mrs Brenda Greer, was unwell during part of this time. So my thanks to Brenda, and my thanks to the former mayors, Councillor English, Councillor Mrs Joy, and Mrs Gibson, who so ably helped out during this busy period. I would like to thank you all for your support during these last few months, especially at the Remembrance Day parade on the 13th of November 2016, which was so very moving and memorable. I recommend you, as councillors, at some stage or another, to attend one of the citizenship ceremonies that takes place at the Archbishop's Palace. There are usually 2 ceremonies a week at 5:30 p.m, usually Tuesday and Thursday. You'll be most welcome, and it may be that one of the citizens at the ceremony may even come from your own ward. There's been many wonderful events that I have attended during these last few months. I've opened a public house, a zebra crossing, and a telephone kiosk. The telephone kiosk at Detlin Village housed a defibrillator. I believe a most innovative use of a telephone kiosk, and I'm sure a use that will catch on in other villages around the county or wider afield. One of the events I attended was the Costermongers Harvest Festival in the Guildhall Yard. This is an annual celebration for the pearly kings and queens of London. There is a rumour that I was seen with about 30 other mayors, all dressed in full regalia, chains and all, dancing round the maypole in the Guildhall Yard. Dancing may not be really the right description or terminology. I had the privilege of welcoming the UNICEF committee from Brunswick House School to the town hall. They held their committee meeting in the chamber, and they were all very well behaved, but they asked me some difficult questions. Definitely budding politicians of the future. I do not know how many of you know that there was a nuclear bunker in Maidstone. Brayshaw's Solicitors in London Road is where the first prototype of 25 regional bunkers across the country was established after the Second World War. This was a truly fascinating visit and thought-provoking, maybe a venture or a venue that councillors would like to visit at some stage. I note that the papers for this evening's meetings are very extensive, so without any delay, let's proceed. Agenda item 9. There are no petitions this evening. Agenda item 10. There are no questions from members of the public this evening. We might go for a record. Agenda item 11. There are no questions from council members this evening. So agenda item 12, current issues. This is a report of the Leader of the Council. So I call upon the Leader of the Council to submit her report on current issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to make it as short as I can. It's a little bit longer than I'd anticipated earlier today, Annabelle, and I'm sorry.
I've got to say, Councillor Mrs Wilson, you may speak for 5 minutes.
I think I know that by now, Mr. Mayor. Local plan, I just thought you'd all like to know the current hearing sessions are due to end on the 13th of December, and the Inspector has suggested he is likely to issue his interim conclusion shortly, and we do believe that will be by January. There he'll indicate where we need to make changes, where we need to modify anything, and where additional work is likely to be required. So we've got there reasonably easily, thankfully. Regarding the town centre, most of you know that the purchase of the old sorting office and Granada House is now completed, and work is commencing on the master plan for the sorting office with our partner KCC. Maidstone East improvements are scheduled for completion by June 2018, in time to welcome the new Thames Link service. And although delayed several times, and you can all groan here, I am reliably informed that the old Vic will be demolished by the end of the financial year, because we've been given deadline after deadline after deadline. Proposals for stage 2 of the public realm improvement should come to committee in February. So there's a lot there that's happened recently. Borough-wide, and I don't have the figures yet, I've only been told this, but borough-wide employment is up, the gap in wages is closing, and the failure rate is reducing for business startups and improving for business survival rates. So I think that's excellent news. Right, no one's pretending that there are not huge challenges lying ahead. I don't think I need to tell you what they are. They've been rehearsed well enough. However, at the festive season, I do think that it's appropriate that at this point in time we can congratulate ourselves as councillors and the officers and our partners for all the hard work they've put in since May to get us from where we were in May to the point we're at now. So with that, I'm going to sit down. That's a record, I think. All I want to do is wish you all a happy Christmas and a very peaceful and prosperous New Year.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you, Councillor? Councillor Falk, please come in. Thank you. We've nearly finished. I now call upon the other group leaders or their representatives to respond. Each of you have 5 minutes. So, Councillor Mrs Blackmore, the leader of the Conservative group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of things I'd like to pick up on what Councillor Mrs Wilson has said. I think it's excellent news about the local plan. It could have been stopped early in its tracks, so I'm glad to hear that we're still on course, hopefully for adoption in the spring of next year. I'm afraid I don't agree with you when you say reasonably easily. I think there's been an awful lot of pain to get us to this point. As to the sorting office in Maidstone East, it definitely needs a facelift in that area, to say the least. And it's good that we will have the new timetable, new station in 2018. My only question is the end of which financial year? Because you did say end of the financial year, so I'd be intrigued to know which one. I think it's good news for the jobs economy. And I think, finally, I'd just like to wrap up and say to everyone, I wish you all a really successful, happy and positive 2017. I think there's many in this chamber who will be very pleased to close the door on 2016 and wish it a fond farewell and lock that door. But let's hope that 2017, for all of us looking forward, let's work as a cohesive unit, regardless of our political persuasion, and get this county town where it should be, the premier town in Kent. So I raise a glass to you all and wish you a happy Christmas and happy 2017.
Thank you. Before I call on the other leaders, Councillor Mrs Fort, is there anything you'd like to declare? Thank you. Then I'll then call on Councillor Mrs Gooch, the leader of the Independent Group.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I really would like to follow on from the very positive note from both the leader and the leader of the Conservative Party. You know, talking about the Post Office and Granada House, Maidstone East, I can think back, not so much with Granada House, that's quite recent, but certainly as far as the Post Office is concerned, we had an urgency committee and we were thinking, shall we, shan't we? It's a lot of money going into partnership with KCC, should we, shouldn't we? And we were really bold, and officers worked so hard to do the background work for us. And as members, because it was a cross-party group, we really hung on to our seats and we stuck with it and we made that decision. And to think that it's come to fruition, I have to say, we ought to be proud of ourselves. When you think that there is no overall control, and there hasn't been with the Maidstone Borough for some years, yet look at what we're achieving. And I look forward to next year, there will be more achievements then, despite the fact that we've got this dreadful financial picture. We're just not sure what financially the future holds. But I have to say, it's thanks to the cooperation between all of us and the hard work of officers that have got us to where we are now. And I thank you all very much. And don't forget, we have been through some very tough times. The local plan, I can think of one or two members who are absolutely really dead against what we're wanting to know. You know who you are, and I've said this before. But the fact is that we respect each other and we're able to discuss these things out in the open, and that is what is so important for this borough. I just wanted to say, oh, what else was it? Oh, yes, town centre. We've got a couple of grants that we've put in for, and I hope that they're going to be successful to really bring the town centre forward. But I would echo our leaders' good wishes to you all, and Merry Christmas to everybody, and bring on 2017.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Gooch. I then call on Councillor Powell, the leader of the UKIP group.
Yes, it's been really good this year to be back on the council, although I didn't expect to be the leader of the group, but unfortunately circumstances have meant otherwise. This is a proper pat yourself on the back session, isn't it? Everybody telling everybody how well they've done, and well done. I mean, if you all agree with that, then let me pat you on the back as well. Yeah. but no, absolutely. Anyway, Councillor Gooch was talking about those one or two people that are dead against the plan. Well, one of them's sitting behind her. But anyway, that's something else. I don't hold that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell. Last but not least, Councillor Harper, the leader of the Labour group.
So I'm pleased we adopted the commercialisation strategy at Policy and Resources, and obviously the sorting office and the Granada and so on are all linked into that in terms of how we want to use our own economic muscle to help push forward regeneration of our town. And I look forward to us working on housing projects to help address the awful issue we've got of homelessness in the borough over the course of the next few years. The quicker we can get that done, the better. In terms of trains, obviously it's good that we're actually going to get Thameslink in a couple of years' time, but our train services to this town are atrocious generally, and they are rapidly deteriorating. I, for one, and I know others here, use the line up from Maidstone West up Strood to St Pancras, and over the last 6 to 7 months that service has really deteriorated significantly. Regularly, not a week goes by without 1 or 2 cancellations or misconnections and so on. And these are trains we're paying £44 return for. A premium service you're paying for a second-rate service. So I think it's about time that we look at renationalising the rail network in this country to actually start to get us a decent rail service for Maidstone. But anyway, I shall finish now and wish everybody a happy and prosperous New Year and look forward to next year.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. So, members, I will now open up this item to questions from council members. This is for a period of 15 minutes, and the questions must relate to the issues raised by the leaders and other group leaders in their speeches. They will be answered as directed by the questioner and will not require a response from all group leaders. Anyone? Quickly moving on. Agenda item 13, the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee, the 19th of September 2016, page 19. I call upon Councillor McLaughlin to move the recommendation of the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee regarding the committee's annual report to Council 2015-16, and the recommendation is on page 19.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the recommendation.
Is that seconded? Councillor Daly. Is the recommendation agreed? I didn't mean to steal your thunder. We're moving on to agenda item 14, the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. I call upon Councillor David Burton to move the recommendation of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. This is regarding the Community Infrastructure Levy, the draft charging schedule and draft regulation 123. The list recommendation is on page 33. Councillor Burton, did you take a degree in Einstein's theory?
It's all relative, Mr. Mayor. So, very quickly, we've heard about the progress of the local plan. We look forward to adoption. Funnily enough, it's going to have to be paid for, the aspirations. On the papers in front of you, you have one of the mechanisms that will help to do so, the Community Infrastructure Levy. Many months, dare I say years, of evolution through strategic planning, most recently at public consultation and further revised, and the committee has resolved to recommend to you, as per the papers, that it goes to the Planning Inspectorate. So I move as per the papers, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Before I call on Councillor Harper, who has indicated he wishes to speak, I ask, is it seconded? Councillor Gregg? Well, I've had Councillor Harper who wishes to speak.
A couple of questions. On page 55, where we're talking about sort of the highways type infrastructure, I would hope that we use the opportunity of the SIL money to help promote cycling as a way of actually getting modal shift, which I know we're committed to, and reducing the air quality pollution problems in our town. And I just want to confirm that on page 56, that the parks and open spaces will be eligible for receiving this funding, because it wasn't too clear from reading the report.
Councillor Burton, did you want to answer that at all? Or?
With your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to respond. I'm sure Councillor Harper has very closely the in-depth debate on all of the points that he has raised. One of the joys of the SIL charging scheme is that it actually gives us flexibility without the limitations of Section 106's to actually apply the resource where it is to the greatest benefit of this borough.
Thank you, Councillor. Then, is the recommendation agreed, members? Thank you. Agenda item 15, the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee. I call upon Councillor Mrs Ring to move the recommendation of the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee regarding the adoption of the new bylaws to cover cosmetic piercing and semi-permanent skin colouring. Mrs Ring.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To keep in the tone of the meeting tonight, I will move this recommendation on page 57.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Ring. Is that seconded? Barnard. Councillor Barnard, yeah. Members, is the recommendation agreed? Thank you. I move on to agenda item 16, the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. I call upon Councillor David Burton to move the recommendation of the Strategic Planning, Sustainability and Transportation Committee. This is regarding the adoption of the Staplehurst Neighbourhood Development Plan. This is to become part of the development plan for Maidstone. Councillor Burton.
Again, thank you, Mr Mayor. Absolutely delighted to be able to do this, and I'm sure you will all join me in congratulating the Staplehurst Neighbourhood Planning Team for many years of tremendous hard work and culminating most recently in a very successful referendum which supported the plan. So without further ado, I move as per the papers that we do indeed adopt this plan.
Is that seconded? Councillor McLaughlin. Thank you. Councillor Perry, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'll try and not turn this into an Oscar ceremony, but I do want to say something. We started work on this plan over 4 years ago, and while I was still chairman of Staplehurst Parish Council, and I'm personally very proud of what has been achieved. We are the first parish in the borough to reach this stage. Although we're not the first neighbourhood plan, I say that because there's the very excellent North Lewes plan, and it's a very, very good plan as well. But coming second and winning the silver medal, there's nothing to be ashamed of. The real credit, however, must go to those parish councillors and residents, since right from the start we involved our residents in this project, and they have worked tirelessly to ensure we finally reached our goal. And none more so than Councillor Joan Buller, who has accompanied me tonight and is in the audience. Joan was awarded the British Empire Medal this year for her services to our community, and this was richly deserved. I'll be the first to say that this has not been easy. We've got off to a rocky start and it was a steep learning curve, but we've had a significant help from officers at NBC, and I want to take this opportunity to thank them as well, because they helped to ensure that the plan is in general compliance with the local plan, which is extremely important for neighbourhood plans in my view. I think it's right to point out that anyone contemplating developing a neighbourhood plan needs to recognise that it does involve a lot of hard work and commitment. And because of this, residents of Staplehurst, who overwhelmingly, as Councillor Burton has alluded to, voted to approve the neighbourhood plan, will expect and require it to be taken very seriously. It is not a document to be put in someone's bottom drawer and forgotten. Far too much work has gone into this project for that to take place. It must therefore be taken as a major material consideration when planning applications are being considered for Staplehurst. As many of you know, I am a passionate advocate for parish councils and the spirit of localism they represent. They are the first tier in our democracy, and this plan embodies that spirit. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Mrs Bryce.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would echo Councillor Perry's comments and pay tribute to Councillor Joan Buller and also the Rural Settlement Group and Staplehurst Parish Council, who have worked tirelessly to bring this plan to fruition. I would also like to draw members' attention to some of the infrastructure laid out in the plan. Staplehurst is really at a crossroads, and there's been much talk about Staplehurst and its crossroads. But I think the plan has been positively prepared, and I think Staplehurst have tried to recognise the need for more housing within this borough. However, we are desperate for the infrastructure that we now need to support it. Just last week, our bank was announced for closure. We have no cash point. We have no petrol station. We have very limited shops. Our shops are being wound down and sold off for housing. We're down to one pub in the village. We desperately need your support in Staplehurst to deliver the infrastructure that is needed to keep Staplehurst a vibrant community that it has been. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone else? Councillor Harper?
Well, just supporting the local councils, and given the problems which they are alluding to in Staplehurst, which have happened since this planning process started in terms of retail and banking, I'm just wondering, given our commercialisation agenda, and we said we would look at other relevant opportunities, with that and with the SIL thing we just approved, is there any way we as an authority can actually start to actually help push some of the infrastructure works in Staplehurst forward in terms of retail, perhaps, and some of the sort of leisure facilities they're talking about? I don't expect, obviously, an answer now, but it's just something perhaps we can think about as how we can use our clout positively to push forward the infrastructure for that community before other development goes on.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Councillor Burton, I take it you'll just take that observation on board. Councillor Clark?
Mr Mayor, I just wanted to say that you can get cash back from the spa in Staplehurst.
Members, I take it we've all noted that. I want to quickly on. We've had this motion proposed and seconded. Members, is this recommendation agreed? Thank you very much. We're now moving on to agenda item 17, the Democracy Committee. And once you I call upon Councillor Fissenden to move the recommendation of the Democracy Committee regarding the venue of the polling station for Fant Ward East. This recommendation is on page 134. Councillor Mrs Fissenden.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation as on page 134.
Members, is that seconded? Councillor Joy. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this? Councillor Harper?
Right.
Councillor Atkinson?
Yep, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I just wish to agree with this proposal because you know, we find parents when they take their children out of school, and then we as a council close the school down so that there can be an election. So I'm totally in favour of moving it to the Grangemore. Thank you very much.
Councillor Harper?
I'd sort of slightly take a different view to Keith on this. I think, whilst obviously there is an issue in terms of the school, from my memory and talking to people, it's really only impacted once, which was in the by-election we had last year, when obviously after Alistair's death. And I think that was when we had to use the hotel. A couple of observations people have made to me are concerns about the access to the hotel. Is that the only way you can actually get into it is you walk down the side of it, but that's also the way into the car park. So it's a relatively narrow passageway for pedestrians and also for cars going in and out of the car park. So I do have some concerns in terms of the safety of access to the hotel, but given the lack of other facilities there, I don't quite know what else to suggest, so I'll probably just allow Keith to get his way.
Well, thank you, Councillor Harper. Members, this motion has been proposed and seconded. Is this agreed? Is this? Thank you. Come back. So is Councillor out now to do that? He is, yeah? Yeah, all right. Members, agenda item 18. This is the Democracy Committee. I call upon Councillor Boughton to move the recommendation of the Democracy Committee. This is regarding the use of the webcasting voting system.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. And, of course, some members attended the briefing we had prior to this meeting on this, and we've all got a 6-page booklet, shall we say, on how the new system works. So, without further ado, I would like to move the recommendations on page 136 of the agenda with the addition of the following after the word decision in the third line. As follows: Part 3.1, Rule 23.1, show of hands, will be amended to read, unless a recorded vote is demanded under Rule 21.4, the Mayor will take the vote by electronic vote, show of hands, or, if there is no dissent, by affirmation of the meeting. And Part 3.1, Rule 21.4, recorded vote, will be amended to read: if 5 councillors present at a council meeting, 3 councillors present as a committee, or 2 councillors present as a subcommittee meeting demand it, the names for and against the motion or amendment or abstaining from voting will be recorded using electronic voting or taken down in writing and entered into the minutes. I hope that's clear. Thanks.
Is that seconded? Councillor Prendergast, yeah. Councillor Mrs Wilson?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to start with an apology, because if my question has been answered earlier this evening, I was in another meeting that was pre-booked before we had the opportunity to come here and find out about this. What concerns me is that in the papers it says that this is for transparency, to improve transparency. Well, I sadly remember when we were last asked whether we wished to go to an electronic system, and the reason it was refused at that time was because we believed it would prove to be less transparent. In other words, when you have a show of hands in this council chamber, you can see who has voted for and who has voted against. Now, I had understood that with this we would actually move, as my colleague here said earlier tonight, to the KCC system, where if we went to the electronic system of voting, it would automatically take the format of our names recorded and shown. So we wouldn't need Councillor Borton's amendment for a named vote, because it would be happening or it would be part of the process. And I wish to move to an electronic system as far as we possibly can, but I still believe very firmly that you should be able to see who has voted for what. And as I say, it might have been covered earlier on, for which I apologise if it was. But if we're moving to a system where you just ping a button and all that comes up is so many for, so many against and so many abstained, then I have some concerns, because actually the transparency has diminished, not increased. If that can be satisfactorily answered, then obviously I'm happy to vote for it.
Councillor Bowden?
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. This issue was discussed at the Democracy Committee about 2 weeks ago, I think. What the amendment does is, in terms of the way, and I think it'd be helpful if I just explained what's being proposed here. In terms of the way that the minutes are presented, such as the minutes here, it's not going to be a named vote all the time in terms of minutes, unless, of course, it's requested under 21.4. What this is about those viewers on the webcast being able to see what's going on. So for those of you who've watched a recording of a meeting on the webcast, you'll notice that when a vote is taking place, often the camera is just either a pan of the whole room, which is very, very difficult to see, or it's on the mayor or the chairman. And so it's very will show how that will look to the viewer on the webcast there. So it'll show who's voted for it, who's voted against it, and then it'll come up with a pie chart which demonstrates the outcome of the vote. So it makes it much clearer for the viewers on the webcast. It changes nothing in terms of the minutes. A named vote can still be requested by the same number of councillors as is the amendment to Rule 21.4 in front of us. And what this is merely about is making the most of the new system we have, because obviously we couldn't vote electronically on the old microphones and the old webcast we have. It's making the most of that. It's making it clear to those people watching on the webcast to increase transparency, because I don't think it's very transparent where you could be watching and you watch a debate and then you don't find out what the vote is. And from that point of view, I think this amendment does its job. So I hope that answers Councillor Mrs Wilson's query. But if it's unclear on page 2, I apologise for that. This is a German system, I believe, so that's why some of so that may explain why some of it's not terribly clear. But it should be obviously green is vote in favour, red is vote against, etc. So I hope that's somewhat helpful.
Councillor Mrs Wilson, yes.
I'm sorry, it's been a long day and I'm probably being very, very dense. But when we vote and it comes up electronically, does it show everybody's name as to how they voted? A simple, yes. So us in this room can see it on screen, presumably, and anybody watching can see it on screen. Thank you.
Yes.
Right, members, we've had this proposal and it's seconded. Members, is the recommendation agreed? Thank you. Members, agenda item 19, this is the Policy and Resources Committee. I call upon Councillor Mrs Wilson to move the recommendation of the Policy and Resources Committee. This is regarding the Council Tax Reduction Scheme 2017-18. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation on page 138 of the agenda with the addition of the following after the word below in the 6th line. To be effective from the 1st of April 2017 for a period of 1 financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Wilson. Is that seconded? Councillor Mrs Blackmore? Is the recommendation agreed? Oh, sorry. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mayor. There is just one item on here I want to bring members' attention to. Those of you who have ploughed through the 231 pages hopefully will have discovered, and I'm referring here to option 12 on page 157. So if you've ploughed through the 231 pages, you'll have discovered that the movement to stop claims for parents who have more than 2 children comes into effect from the 1st of April next year. Now, those of you, the P&R committee that I stood up and addressed, will know what I'm going to say, that there are expectant mothers out there as we speak who are defenceless in avoiding this additional reduction in their benefits. Now, we have no idea what the financial effect of this is going to be because it's trying to predict new births in the future. But the Council have given us an indication that the effect is £427.96 per annum, which for a new mother, I would suggest to you, is quite a significant sum. Now, I'm not suggesting we change this system because I've been advised that the publicity of this gives the impression to anybody reading it that everything is effective from the 1st of April 2016. 17. I would have preferred to have seen this option deferred for a year, but then I'm told it's likely to confuse members of the public into thinking that everything on here has been deferred by a year, and I don't want that to happen, so I'm not proposing any changes. But I think there's a moral deficiency in this, and I just want to draw members' attention to that so that you're aware of that in supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
I believe Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, option 13, we're concerned about people with vulnerable people with disabilities. We don't want them to feel that they're actually begging. So can there be some sort of safeguards in there to make sure that people don't feel that they're begging? Thank you very much.
Councillor Mrs Wilson, did you want to address that?
Well, if it helps at all, I think the sections that... There was a very long debate, both with the leaders by themselves and at the committee meetings, to deal with possible hardship to disabled. And the one, and I can't put it in front of me immediately, but the bit that was really pertinent to that has been amended so that we feel appropriate. So that those with disabilities actually are not penalised. So I think we can give some surety that the real appropriate section has been dealt with. I won't pick up on Councillor McLaughlin because clearly you've had your say and you're not making an amendment.
Members, is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this? Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I do notice that all the way through the document, page 222 to 369, the applicant is referred to as he all the way through. I presume this should be all genders.
Agreed. Right. Councillor Daly.
Chairman, I hesitate to talk about this thing at all because there's so much of it. But I have just come across an absolute spiffing sentence which I must draw to everybody's attention because I can't believe the person who ever wrote this is human. It's paragraph 58 on page 368. I don't know what it's talking about actually, but it says the amount of any payment other than a war pension to compensate for the fact that the applicant's partner, the applicant's deceased spouse or deceased civil partner, or the applicant's partner's deceased spouse or deceased partner was a slave labourer or a forced labourer, had suffered property loss or had suffered personal injury, or was a parent of a child who had died during the Second World War. They must all be 97 at least.
Councillor Daly, I'm impressed. You must have read through everything. Members, we've had his proposal and seconded. Is it agreed? Is this? Thank you. We're moving on to agenda item 20, and it appears there's no report from the Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee on this occasion. And agenda item 21, there's no report from the Licensing Committee on this occasion. Agenda item 22, this is a report of the Director of Finance and Business. So I call upon the Director of Finance and Business the Director of Finance and Business Improvement to submit his report to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Members need to make a decision about appointing an external auditor to the authority for 2018-19 and the years beyond. Our external auditors are currently Grant Thornton, and they are due to continue in post both for this year, 16-17, and for 17-18. After 17-18, a new regime will come into force. This gives local authorities a number of options which are set out in the report. First of all, the Council could appoint an auditor itself through an independent panel. It could also procure an auditor jointly with one or more other authorities. Or finally, it could ask a sector-led body to appoint a Can you hear me now? Thank you. Yes, the sector-led body is a subsidiary of the Local Government Association. The way it will work will be to negotiate with those audit firms who are eligible to audit local authorities, of whom there are currently 9, and appoint a firm on our behalf. The Audit, Governance and Standards Committee considered the options at its meeting on 19th of September. It concluded that the final option, using a sector-led body, was the most cost-effective approach. The reasons are that it ensures the benefits of bulk buying and it's less time and cash intensive than undertaking the procurement of an auditor ourselves. Accordingly, the recommendation is that you accept PSA's invitation to opt into their scheme and make the necessary delegations to me to liaise with the PSAA. Thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin, are you going to say anything?
I'll say something if you like, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I would just add to what the officer has said is that the PSAA is a non-profit making organisation. So it's the least cost approach for us. There's strength in numbers in negotiating with audit companies, and I think it's the right way to go. So if I may, I would recommend the recommendations to you and move that we agree them. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Councillor Perry? Yeah.
I'll second it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Members, as this is the last full council meeting of the year, I'd just like to take the opportunity, along with all the other people, to wish you a truly... I'm jumping the gun. Sorry. It is Christmas. This is agenda item 23, membership of committees. I move that the wishes of the leader of the Conservative group with regard to the membership of committees as set out on the agenda be accepted. Is that seconded? Councillor Bolton? Is that agreed? Thank you. So as this is the last full council meeting of the year, I join with all the others and like to take the opportunity of wishing you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Woolies in war.